Remote working and online team meetings have been on the increase for years. But with the current coronavirus problems and people having to work from home, there's even more need from them. But how do you get all of your team to contribute usefully and feel comfortable in a remote meeting? Let's be honest, it's hard face to face, but perhaps even harder when you're online to get introverts to speak and extroverts to be quieter. So I'm really pleased to welcome back Vic O'Farrell, who is an award-winning personality profiler, to get her take on personalities and remote meetings. Welcome to Activate Your Introvert, the podcast for intrapreneurs and business leaders to help unlock more productivity and creativity so you get a better business. And if you'd like to talk to me about issues raised in this podcast or others relating to introverts, please visit introvertinbusiness.co.uk.
It's lovely to be back. Thanks, John. And yeah, like you say, in this current circumstance, suddenly everyone is jumping onto Zoom or other platforms are available. It's just understanding how it's you and me, one-on-one. We know I'm an extrovert, you're an introvert, so we can have this conversation quite normally. But you put two people on that don't know what each other's style is, and just a two-way conversation can be very extrovert heavy. And then you chuck in the mix of a whole team, and I just feel that the extroverts are not giving the introverts time.
So, I mean, that of course I get, because in normal meetings, even if we were face to face, one of the big things that introverts hate is the fact that an extrovert could easily just keep talking, want to talk about whatever they want to talk about. And I know, and I can, of course, I'm sitting there watching you and you're kind of going, I want to jump in, I want to say something. Whereas introverts are almost the other way. If somebody's happy to just keep talking, most of them will just let it run and let it run and let it run, until they get to the point where there's this one thing which they completely disagree with, and sometimes they'll then go bang, and that doesn't help either, of course. So if a company's doing remote meetings, perhaps there's 4, 5, 6 on the team, and in these days when we're all having to remotely work, I think a daily team meeting is incredibly important. But how do we deal with it? What would you say is the first rule of running a remote team meeting?
First of all, the host, so whether that is the team leader, the manager, another member, whoever's hosting it, has to set rules and boundaries, and we have to have discipline in those meetings. And I think, like you would have a normal meeting where we all walk in face to face, you generally have a bit of chit chat, don't you, for the first 5 meetings? Well, us extroverts do.
Extroverts do. But actually, and I think this is the interesting thing, introverts might not like small talk, but I think especially when people are working from home, it becomes even more important. There was a discussion I was having with a couple of people earlier on today. They were going, oh, you introverts love it working from home. And actually, many of them don't. It's great for the first day, it's great for the second day, and suddenly you're stuck away and you want to talk to people. It's not that introverts don't like conversation. What they don't want is the rambly nonsense where they can't join in. So in that 5 minutes, you're absolutely spot on. I had a meeting today with a group of 5 people, and we said, right, the first 10 minutes are off agenda, and then the agenda starts at 11 o'clock. And then so everybody knew that, and everyone knew that then there was some structured agenda.
You're right, that's what I think you have to do. And for a host, for example, on here, like you just did to me before we started recording, you stuck me on mute. But, you know, that's the ability that you have on these platforms, is that the host can say, right, it's open agenda. You know, even if you've got maybe 10 people on the call, people want to go off, you can stick them into side rooms, can't you? But then you say, at 11 o'clock, the meeting will start. You will all be muted. You then have the ability to go on to the chats. You can put in a live chat. You have the ability, and I know this is a podcast, so it doesn't really work very well, but you have the ability to put your hand up if you want to.
So let me just tell the listeners what happened there. Vic has got a little orange disc, you know, the I guess it's like one of those speaking bubbles you'd see in cartoons. She holds up this speech bubble, and I immediately know that she wants to talk. And that's a really good one, because you could then just unmute if you're not all unmuted all the time. Ways of letting each other know that you want to talk rather than just butting in. You said something interesting earlier, Vic, which was, I want to jump in constantly. How would I, as a facilitator, and you're off on one talking about something really important, of course it is, but I know as a facilitator that somebody else wants to say something. How can I, on a remote meeting, politely cut you off?
Well, I think it is in that polite way. Even as extroverts, as mad as I am, I still have to take a breath. So as I go to take that breath, as the host, you would go, Vic, that's a really great point there, but can I just stop you for 1 second? Because I just want to bring John in, because I know John's got something of value to add. So hold those thoughts, Vic, mute me, bring in the other person. Because if the extrovert has got something of true value, they will remember it and want to still add it. But if they were just waffling, then they'll just shut up and go, oh, okay.
Love it.
Join in the next minute.
Love it. So rule number one, we were talking about how to make sure everybody says something at the beginning. My simple rule is, in the first 5 minutes of any remote meeting, everybody must be engaged in some way. Whether that's they say hello, they talk about themselves, they introduce the problem they want to talk about on that meeting. But in the first 5 minutes, everybody's got to say something. So you can decide what else goes on in the meeting. What would you say your next rule is for a remote meeting?
Give the introverts the chance to answer. I would always have an agenda before a meeting. So make sure that that agenda has gone out to everybody, and say to people, if there is something you specifically want to add to any of these items, please, can you let me know beforehand? Because then as the host, when I get to that agenda point, some introverts don't even want to put their hand up and say it's me, or put their little speech bubble up and say, oh, please. But as me, as the host, I'd look down and I'd get to point 4. I'd go, okay, on point 4, I'd also like to bring John in, please, if you could join, because you said that you had something to add.
And I love it, because I think one of the really important things, online meeting, offline meeting, doesn't matter. So that the whole team can think about what's on the agenda, always send it out 2-3 days in advance. Even extroverts that like winging it might read it, they might not, but introverts certainly will read it, because that's how they're going to process stuff and that's how they're going to think through it. Getting the agenda out, I think, is a really good point. Where do you stand on the starting and finishing on time thing, Vic?
You start, so you, like you say, you have your bit of social before, so right, we are starting at 11 o'clock, and as the host you just have to either keep your eye, I'm looking up and I know you can't see, it's a podcast on my clock here, or you have a timer and you know what the points are. So when you bring it back, right, okay, I need to bring it back, I'm moving on to point 4, but we are running out of time. I want to give this point what it needs, so if we don't get to point 5, that will be moved to the next meeting. So if we can keep to time, please, folks. Just as a host, would manage the meeting very much like you would if we were in a room.
From a host's point of view, the meeting may well be quite similar, but the important thing is that the host or the facilitator needs to do is manage it much more tightly than normal. Whether that's sticking to time, sticking to the agenda, not letting the agenda go off, because as soon as you do that, it's into uncharted territory, which is harder to get back on a remote meeting. But so the host job is much harder, I guess, in that sense. Which leads me on to another thought. I'd love to know what you think about this one, because I've done it in a few meetings. If you've got 4, 5, 6 people, allocate some different roles so that everyone's involved again. So it doesn't have to be the boss, which is the facilitator or host. Somebody else could be the timer. Somebody else could take the action points. If you've got a big enough meeting and you've got a lot of the text chat going on, potentially you could have somebody monitoring that to feed through to the host the really important things. Any other roles that you think might work there?
Like you say, taking the minutes, because whilst a lot of these things get recorded, you don't really want to have to go back. It's getting through the waffly chat to take the action points out of that meeting as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. Now, you said something interesting there about recording, and I'm I sense lots of introverts that I know would be oh, hang on, this is going to be recorded, and now everything I say is down for posterity. Do you think that if it's a regular team meeting, that it needs to be recorded? In a face-to-face meeting, you wouldn't even consider recording it.
No, you're absolutely right. I guess just the more I'm using it, I'm just recording it because I take snippets for marketing. But yes, in a standard meeting, you don't need to have it recorded at all. And for that reason, then, somebody does need to take down the notes of the action points, because the host won't be doing that. They'll be looking at all the screen and making sure that they're managing it right.
We've got about 30 seconds left. Any big ones that you think we've missed, Vic?
Just be aware of yourself and don't hog the meeting. Let other people talk.
Yeah. And how do you convince an extrovert to do that before you start the meeting?
Remind them that we're on this call for 30 minutes and there's 10 of us on here. That makes 3 minutes each. Please don't take more.
And I guess what's the flip of that? How do you get introverts to actually say something, I suppose?
That we're on this call for 30 minutes. There's 10 of us. There's only 3 minutes to fill. So please take your 3 minutes.
Yeah. And one that I often do, both at the beginning and end of the call, and I'll let people know before the call starts, we are going to work around the entire room. I am going to ask everyone to say something for 30 seconds, 1 minute or whatever. I wouldn't put it as much as that includes you, but make it clear to everyone in the room that I do expect some piece of but it will be time limited, so that some people know that they're going to have to speak and other people know that they're going to speak for a small amount of time. One other one that I'll add, I did it accidentally to you and muted you earlier on. One thing I often say to people is self-mute, not self-isolate. So get everybody to mute themselves, apart from when they want to say something, because that way you're not getting all the background noise and the cat walking in or whatever else is going on in home working. That's been really useful, Vic, and I think it's great because we've looked at it from all sorts of sides, and this is a problem of today and the next few months. But I suspect this is a genie that won't be going back in the bottle. I think lots more remote meetings will happen once the current pandemic's all over. Thank you very much. How would somebody get back in touch with you, Vic? So
find me via my website, which is motivationalvoice.uk. And the email is
vic@motivationalvoice.uk.
Exactly.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot and catch up with you soon.
Thank you.